Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Freshagenda, and Steve, we're back with a whole lot of noise happening outside our window here. We're hoping this will work. So, Steve, we didn't come back last week. We're here,
Yeah.
as I suspected, but we're here with our weekly take, and we've just released a quarterly report at the end of last week to our subscribers, and the outlook's not all that positive, is it?
No. We said in the outlook that it's mixed, but it's bearish.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's out a little bit. You'd say the fundamentals are getting better, but in the short term, we've still got a lot of headwinds. Yeah. I think that's so. Accordingly, back to this chart that we like to use a bit. So on the positive side, and there are some green things here, we are seeing slowing milk growth in Europe and the US. Trouble is in the US, it's not happening across the country. It's happening in regions where it's either for domestic use, domestic fresh product, or it's on the West Coast where it's most, the incremental milk goes into powder and ingredients, butterfat. But in the centre, it's still growing too much, generating too much.
And that's cheese country.
Yeah, and that comes into red later. We are seeing some recovering Chinese demand. So recent trade has been a bit better in several categories.
Yeah.
But that's it for the greens. And we go down the negatives. We have.
This is a long list.
You can see the space created on the left-hand side there for plenty of items. So, yeah, oversupplied US cheddar. And we have a link there. It's knocking into the competition for other producers. Obviously, that's something you see play out. Whilst other products are in good shape, Chinese demand for whole milk powder imports is still weaker than usual, or weaker than normal, weaker than in the past.
Yeah.
So that's a slow recovery. And so our review of what we think is the Chinese balance sheet looks like there's no need to really boost the imports until we see the milk tightening in that market. So as a consequence, that backs into the New Zealand product mix, and we made changes in last season. We saw big changes in last season. We think there's not a lot of change going into this. We see some increase in whole milk powder output as China recovers slowly, but not a great deal of change in that balance. So,
that's being fairly closely matched with demand, isn't it? So that means skim and butter.
Yeah, that's right.
In New Zealand.
Asian skim milk powder demand is certainly weak. It's well below trend and not showing a lot of sign of recovery quickly. So that's hanging over the market. In addition to that, we've got quite weak domestic use or domestic demand for ingredients, skim milk powder in particular, in Europe and US, and that's about domestic food categories requiring lower ingredients because demand is backed into the requirements of manufacturers. So combining those two, on the ingredient side, we see profoundly lower requirement for skim milk powder. And just to cap it off, on the whey side, it's a complex little part of the sector. But what's weighing on this is the slow recovery in the higher WPC lines, which where margins are quite weak. So that's leaving more solids going into just commodity whey.
Yeah, with that more cheese, with that increased cheese production, there's more whey.
That's right.
Overall.
The watch. So we could have said European weather, because that looks like it's very dry. We've got water shortages in several places and it's very patchy. US crop weather, which is changing rapidly, and that's going to stay volatile. Crop prices are going to stay quite volatile. And then what happens in the New Zealand spring?
Yeah, and we're well and truly in El Nino conditions. Every model around the world has confirmed it. Nevertheless, we've had a very wet June in Australia, but there are certainly some implications, not quite as clear cut for New Zealand, that we'll be watching as we head into spring.
Still pretty wet over there, causing a lot of havoc in the North Island still, and that will affect the season uptake.
Yep.
So there's lots of things flowing from that. In the run-up to this event, therefore, these have been going on for quite a while. These lines keep falling. So in the last 2 weeks since the last event, the forward curves of futures have continued to weaken. So the short-term risk out of Europe right now is that we're seeing suppliers dropping product basically because they want to carry it through the holiday season. So before they nick off to their lovely villas in the Med or in high mountain areas, then they're wanting to offload product and put it in the market. Now that's coming at a time when New Zealand's in the upswing of its production and therefore the offering to the market and the offering on GDT. So forward curves have weakened in anticipation. The spot prices have fallen. In the US, some spot prices are very ugly, particularly in cheese. So, yeah, we're in a short-term, quite bearish situation until we see some traction going on the demand side. So this event.
Very negative. Not much above the line there at all, Steve.
No, look, I think you'd have to. We have sought out some positive takes out of this, and I'll come to those. But yeah, it's brought things back to it's brought skim milk powder back together. It's brought butter into close alignment. Very heavy falls on butter after several weeks, several events of progress. It went up, and we've gone back 5 events now on that front. Skim milk powder was very disappointing, and that's reflecting the falls in Europe. Just some of those forward curves that come out of this versus recent events. So butter still tracking softer, still melting. Skim milk powder, whilst the curves they no longer slope downwards, they're going up, but they've also come off quite a bit. So
yeah, those early contracts have really come down.
Okay. And in whole milk powder, we were onto this last time. We're certainly seeing a trend here. Pulse is no good for the seller.
It doesn't seem to be, does it, Steve?
No. Here we've seen another revival of old pulse. So there's definitely a trend line there you can see on these two results. It's a big difference between them, but it doesn't seem to work on pulse.
Interesting.
So in terms of demand, this was profoundly weak, except for the whole milk powder. Whole milk powder was not bad. Buying was quite different. We'll come to that. But, skim milk powder and butter, we have to go back a fair way to find demand that weak.
That's pretty ugly, isn't it?
Yeah. So we looked at this last time, that left-hand side skim. So we've seen falling demand coming to this event. Now again, this is quite bad. So it didn't change a lot. That, rusted on buyers came to this and they sat there and kept bidding as we went through it, and butter was just awful after some fairly good demand in small volumes, but that's the story of the event.
Yeah.
Whole milk powder is really interesting. China bought, even though demand was pretty good, came from regions other than China, because that's the lowest we've seen, the lowest percentage for a long time, the lowest tonnage since 2016, and one of the handful of events where it was that low over the whole of GDT. So not much precedent for that. So what's in the background as well? So given China typically takes 2/3 or 70% of whole milk powder volumes, and they've dropped right down these last, for this hasn't just been this event. You can see the slide that's been going on. What's occurred now as well is that there's a lot of product brought forward. So that's the change in the offer volume profile between early June and now early July. And so that's been a change to bring that volume forward.
Yeah.
No change in the full season, simply shifted from post-peak into this period as China buys a lot less. And as we're not seeing any spark to cause that to change in their internal market. So will other regions do the heavy lifting? From this event, we saw Southeast Asia pick up, and a record in the other direction. It was the highest tonnage for 67 events for that region. That shows the percentage, but the tonnage was actually pretty strong for what is a low period. So can that region step in and take up the volumes that are coming if China is going to remain weak? I'd be dubious.
Yeah.
So I think we're in some fairly rough, unpredictable times in whole milk powder. A couple of other things. I don't want to drag this out too long because we've already had the glare. Right. Just a couple of interesting comparisons now where the Oceania butterfat values have gone. You can see that So what we've got there is the fat equivalent value of US cream versus the New Zealand FOB. So obviously there are costs of getting there, but 21% of AMF sales have gone to North America in the last 3 events. So that's come back up as a volume. And naturally we saw a bit of trade in this period here where that gap was quite wide as AMF was softening. Now AMF's taken another step down. So I would suggest we're going to see more attraction for imports and probably see that value in the US come into pressure. So on the right-hand side, the situation in Europe is also changing. So that's, again, AMF, we have seen a reasonable volume go up to Europe over the in that second half of last year. That's coming back on the agenda. I think if that continues to widen, obviously it depends on European fat, which is also coming off. So it may not be such a risk, but it's in the territory to start it gets interesting for me.
Yeah, it's thought, although we're not where we were.
No. Okay. Great page. Chart of the week.
Oh, the chart of the week bounces in.
Surprised ourselves. Right.
So, Steve, back in the States, and some fairly horrendous numbers. That cheese story is showing through into these class 3 and class 4 prices. The class 3 really having dived for some time. And interesting what the expectations are in terms of futures. Fairly bold predictions, would you say there, Steve?
Yes. I mean, that if we put up the cheddar price as well, you'd see a similar pattern. But if you look at that line, it's been pulled down by this worsening short-term situation.
Yeah.
Which, milk production report that came out last week didn't give us much hope this is going to change quickly.
Yeah.
So possibly the line keeps getting pulled, but for a short-term turnaround like that, I'd say the chances are that that's not going to happen. So there's good risk there for those with that exposure. Yeah. All right. That's it from us. Thanks for watching. We'll be back sometime soon.
Not next week.
Probably not next week because we'll be on a road trip. The week after's a little dodgy as well. Okay, bye from us.